Good morning, friends, and welcome to a Hasty Podcast. I'm your coat rack, Weston Hasty. I had to think about it there. I didn't have one prepared. I didn't have a word prepared. I'm like, what should I say? What should I say? I'm your something, Weston Hasty. And I looked around the room to try to find an object to be. I don't have a coat rack, and it's the first thing that came to mind. I've got a number of mugs, plates, forks. I've got a number of because I'm a disgusting mess, I've got plates and stuff everywhere. But I've got a stapler, I've got books, I've got all these tools and utensils and stuff. Coat rack. Yep, sure. That's that's the one. Welcome to a Hasty Podcast. You're listening to a Hasty Podcast. I have to keep saying that over and over again, just in case you forget the name of the podcast, Hasty Podcast. It would just be a shame if you just didn't remember that the name of this podcast was the Hasty Podcast. This is episode 8, I think. Last time I said 6, I was wrong. It was 7. So this time it should be 8. Not that it matters. Can you imagine if I was actually keeping track of what episode I was on as I got to each episode each time? It feels like so unnecessary, I guess, to keep track of that, especially for a daily podcast. Can you imagine one day where yes, you're listening to episode 1343 of a Hasty Podcast. Does it matter? Does the number matter at that point? I am keeping track anyway, though. So maybe it will, maybe it won't. That would be absurd. 1,000. What did I just say? 1,400? That would be almost 5 years. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where that goes. Welcome. We didn't have a podcast last night. Last morning, yesterday morning. We didn't have one yesterday. Wow. There goes the brain. Brain has just decided to just give up. We didn't have one yesterday. I apologize for that. There's no good reason for that. There isn't. I just didn't record a podcast yesterday. I woke up, relatively as one wakes up. Now, I didn't come springing out of bed, because you will never find me springing out of bed when I wake up. Ever. It doesn't matter what the scenario. I could be actively getting robbed, and I'm not springing out of that bed. I'll get up when I'm ready. But that was part of the problem. I woke up in time to get up for the podcast, but I just rolled over and decided, nah, not this morning. We've talked about morning brain. I just straight up didn't get up. And to be fair to myself, I had stayed up especially late the night before working on some of my other stuff that I do. So I had stayed up especially late, so I was just especially not having it in the morning. So to be fair to myself, it was, a rougher morning than usual. Still not a good excuse. I could have tried to record this in the evening and still had a podcast up in time for the following morning, which would have been yesterday morning. I could have still had time to get some kind of recording done, but by the time I got up and I went to work and I got back home, I had other projects that needed to be done, and they're a little bit higher priority, so I had other stuff I had to do. I had to do them, so I just missed a podcast day, and I apologize, everybody. I apologize. You wouldn't think doing this would be very hard, and it's not. I'm not going to tell you it is, because it's not. To do it well, I couldn't tell you. I do not know that I'm doing this well. So I can't speak to that, but just to do it, it's pretty easy, and I didn't do it. But all the same, I hope you'll forgive me. We're still a small podcast. We do have some exciting news. As exciting as it gets for a brand new podcast from someone who has zero expectations for this podcast being worth anything to anyone, right? We have over 50 plays. We have over 50 streams. I don't remember what the number is now, but I was casually looking at some of my stats earlier, and actually, I think this was yesterday. My days are running together now. I think it was yesterday we hit our 50 plays mark. So thank you all so much for listening, because we've only had, again, this is episode 8, so we've had seven episodes and a pilot episode. That's better than a little more than 10 plays an episode, if I do say so myself. That's not too bad. Back when I started my YouTube channel, my Let's Play Gaming YouTube channel back in 2012, that wasn't getting 10 views a video. Oh boy, it was not. It was getting no views. So hey, look at that. My 2020 half-hour daily podcast thing is already a much wilder success than my 2012 Let's Play channel. So there you go. Look at that. It's pretty exciting news. Speaking of YouTube, I've got some news. I've got some news to talk about YouTube. You may have heard of this. This is breaking news to me as of recording this. This is breaking news. So maybe you haven't heard of this yet. Maybe I'm at the cusp of being a news podcast. YouTube has officially announced their cancellation of YouTube Rewind 2020. And for those of you that are uninitiated, that maybe don't spend a lot of time on YouTube or maybe haven't heard of this, YouTube Rewind is a yearly video that YouTube itself makes. Starting, when did they start that? 2015 or something like that? I don't remember when the first one was, but they've been doing this for a number of years now. I feel like longer than 15. I feel like maybe it was 14. But they've been doing this for a number of years, and in the past, the idea of the video was to accumulate, that's not the right word, but basically have a compilation of some of the biggest YouTubers, the biggest names on the platform, some of the biggest trends and references to the biggest videos. All the big like YouTube happenings are represented in some way in one cohesive YouTube video, so that people can watch this video and sort of reflect back on the goings-on of YouTube in the past year. That's the idea. And the first YouTube Rewind back in 2014-ish, whatever it was well received. It was new. It hadn't been done on YouTube before. It had lots of well-known references and YouTubers, and I think it was a more optimistic time too. It's kind of funny thinking back on it now in 2020 in such a pessimistic time where just everybody sucks. Everything sucks. This year sucks. So it's kind of hard to imagine this year where everyone kind of celebrated this YouTube Rewind video for what it was. And of course, looking forward to the future of getting even more YouTubers in and more references and making the video bigger and better every year. And that was awesome. The first one that ever came out, I don't remember it super well anymore because it was years ago. I should go back and rewatch some of those old Rewind videos with like the Harlem Shake in them, or I'm trying to remember what other trends there were. That's the one I remember. I did the Harlem Shake. What was the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge and that kind of stuff? I don't know if that was in the Rewind or not, but like, you know, that was like the era. That was like the age, maybe-ish, I think, of the original Rewind. I'm trying to remember what kind of trends there were back then. But yeah, that was the origination of YouTube Rewind. And those of you that are familiar with Rewind know the direction it goes in subsequent years. It holds up. I think the first 3-ish years of YouTube Rewind are good. At least decent, with some notable complaints about certain YouTube stars missing or not being invited, or actually, that's kind of mostly it. A lot of the controversies were just demands, basically, to involve this, that, or whatever YouTuber that didn't make it. Of course, you never know for sure if a YouTuber wasn't in the Rewind because YouTube didn't invite them, or if it was because they were invited but chose that YouTuber chose not to participate for one reason or another. Maybe they're too busy, or maybe they just couldn't be bothered. I don't know. Whatever the case might be. But that, and of course, in later years, you did start hearing some stories from YouTubers talking about YouTubers that did participate in the Rewind, talking about what a bad experience Rewind was actually to shoot for. So that kind of, over the years, kind of started rolling the ball towards this YouTube Rewind thing isn't really all glamorous that it's cracked up to be. It's not all that amazing. But from the consumer end, watching the videos, the first few that they made were pretty good. But the quality, it wasn't that the production quality went down, but it seemed as the years went on, YouTube corporate, right, began to seriously lose touch with its viewer base, I think. Especially as YouTube started focusing on diversifying their rewinds, which on the outside sounds great. Diversifying in the sense of bringing more. I don't want to just keep you reusing the word diverse over and over again. I was trying to think of another word, any word, but a diverse audience. You have multiple YouTubers of different cultures and nationalities and ethnicities, a wider representation of the people on the platform, as opposed to YouTube being very West-centric in terms of like white men being very popular on the platform, especially of the American or English, at least English-speaking persuasion, introducing a wider array of cultures and ethnicities and that kind of thing into YouTube Rewind. That by itself is not the problem. And I get that YouTube was trying to incorporate more of these YouTubers and these content creators, but a lot of the complaints that came with the actual results, the outcome, the actual product that was delivered, is that because YouTube was trying to deliver this diverse array of voices, it often wasn't especially impactful to any one viewing culture. So if you were, say, an American viewer of YouTube Rewind, and you're getting all these references to all these YouTubers from anywhere in the world that isn't American, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I didn't watch these videos. I don't understand these references. I don't understand these memes. I don't understand these trends. So you kind of fragmented your audience, and I feel like that was the beginning of the end for YouTube a little bit. They started to, I don't know, kind of it's so hard to explain, because on the outside it seems like such a good idea to bring in all these voices, and I think it is. But you didn't have multiple videos. You just had the one Rewind video. You didn't have a way of sort of like spotlighting, oh, here were the trends in this place. Here's your video. They didn't make like a YouTube Rewind America 2017, a YouTube Rewind India 2017, a YouTube Rewind Japan 2017. They didn't do a bunch of different videos. So I think what happened is that there were a lot of people that felt like they were out of place in Rewind, that originally, with the original videos that were very West-centric, because that was what was big on the platform in the early days, were feeling a little out of place, weren't feeling the vibe, weren't feeling the hype for Rewind as they did in previous years. Because you do have to understand that YouTube trying to broaden out and expand into foreign markets, and foreign in the sense that YouTube's headquarters is literally based out of California, I think. It's Google. It's owned by Google. I would have to look up exactly where they're headquartered. But relative to where they're headquartered, trying to branch out into foreign markets. So as that has been a recent push in these few recent years for YouTube to branch out, they've been focusing away from a lot of those West-centric trends in their YouTube Rewind, which I think put off a lot of viewers. But in the last couple of years, it also seems like they kind of missed their mark on trends just altogether, focusing on topics that people didn't really care about, the videos themselves being kind of cringeworthy. It's so hard to put into words without watching the videos themselves and also living during the time that those videos were produced in, when it seemed very clear that the people making the videos didn't understand their target audience. It's kind of like when your mom or something, say you're really into Fortnite and you're like a 17-year-old boy, and then your mom busts in your room and is like, hey son, I know how to floss, and starts doing that stupid floss dance, and you, the 17-year-old boy, you're like, Mom, God, that's so cringe, please, Lord, stop. It was like that, but the YouTube viewer was the 17-year-old boy, and the YouTube corporate was the mom, right? Is that a good analogy? Do you understand where I'm coming from? That was the vibe we were kind of getting at, to the point where the disconnect between YouTube corporate and the average viewer had become so far apart. Like, the two had come so far apart that YouTube Rewind 2018 was the most disliked video on the entire platform. So, in response, YouTube, seeing that they were clearly failing to hit their mark, Oh, I should mention this too. It doesn't help too that YouTube started moving away from using YouTube creators and started just taking on mainstream celebrities from mainstream, like either Hollywood or TV, that kind of thing. They started using celebrities in their video, and that really ruffled some YouTuber feathers because they aren't YouTubers, and this is YouTube Rewind. It's not. It feels wrong when YouTube Rewind 2018 opens with Will Smith in the video. It's like, are we watching a Hollywood movie or YouTube? Anyway, that ruffled some feathers. It's worth noting because that was a huge issue that people took. But after 2018 being the most disliked video, YouTube shifted course, and they decided to, in 2019, completely stay away from the entire idea of producing their own video that compiled all these creators and trends into a produced video or a choreographed video into something completely different. I'm going to take a coffee break here real quick. I do have my coffee. I do not have my latte mix in it. Why can I not think of the word creamer? Why do I have to? Why does my brain go blank when I have to think of the word creamer? But yeah, continuing on with our story. In 2019, YouTube completely decides to shift course and instead creates a compilation video. You'll hear it. It was like the top 10 list of YouTube rewinds, where YouTube broke it down by a number of different demographics in terms of breakout channels in different regions around the world, or highlighted channels in different genres of YouTube, whether it was like gaming or, I don't know, vlogging. I don't remember what the topics were, to be honest. And that was a part of the problem with YouTube Rewind 2019. It is completely forgettable. So much so that in one of my streams, one of my viewers was just doing like a trivia thing for me and some of the other players involved in the stream. For those of you not familiar, I stream video games on YouTube. But one of my viewers was just popping us some trivia questions for fun in the chat, and we were trying to answer them on stream. And one of the questions was, what was the most disliked video on YouTube? And I think that was what the question was, but we were like, oh yeah, it's got to be YouTube Rewind 2019 because it was so bad. And we were going like, oh, it's got to be 2019. It was so bad. Completely forgetting that the literal video we were thinking about was 2018, because 2019 was just so goddamn forgettable. Because the viewer was like, no, it was YouTube 2018. That was the one with Will Smith in it. We were like, what? And we looked it up, right? In 2019 was this top 10 list version. 2018 was the Will Smith one. And it was like, oh yeah, 2019, that's right. It was such a forgettable video. And that was a part of the problem. It was the type of video that you might make to pitch to like investors. Like, look at YouTube stats. Look at how popular we are. Invest in YouTube. We're a global phenomenon. That was what that video screamed. None of it had the character that the previous videos had. Even if the previous videos had missed their mark in many ways, this video had no character to speak of whatsoever. It was boring. It was something that, I don't know, any top 10 list channel on YouTube could have done a better job themselves of doing, basically. But this was produced by Big Daddy YouTube itself. Forgettable video, and frankly though, completely not controversial. They didn't mismanage their trends. They weren't cringy. They weren't misrepresenting any communities in any way whatsoever. They didn't have to bring in a bunch of YouTube creators, waste their time, and make their days horrible by having them sit through a 12-hour film shoot to do 5 seconds of work, which you might hear about some YouTubers complained about back in the day. So in that way, it was a completely non-offensive video, but it just lacked any kind of character. And for YouTube, a platform full of characters on the platform, it was just sad. It was just sad to see what appeared to be the end of an era for YouTube Rewind, because no matter what you could say about the rewinds that weren't popular toward the end, the quote-unquote bad ones, right? No matter what you could say about them, at least YouTube friggin' tried. They tried to make something. They missed their mark. They didn't understand their viewer. and they should have taken on some consultants that were YouTubers themselves instead of just guessing. Instead, in 2019, they gave up, they threw in the towel, and they did what they do best, and that's make an investor's presentation for their Rewind video. And we were all ready back in 2019 to pretty much accept that this is what every YouTube Rewind is going to look like now, are these investors' presentations of YouTube. And it was quite sad. And I think a lot of the hype around anticipating rewinds died that day that Rewind came out. That day is the day any hype for future rewinds died. Which brings us to the news that I was talking about earlier, and that's that YouTube Rewind 2020 has officially been canceled. And it makes me feel conflicted in many ways because, I should have had this up already. Let me read you. I can have this up momentarily. Don't bail on me now. You've already made it so far into my podcast. Don't bail on me now. How do I use Twitter on the computer? I can do this. You got to believe. Okay, here it comes. YouTube has this announcement. I'll read it for you. Since 2010? Did they start in 20? Has it been 10? Jesus. Since 2010, we've ended the year with Rewind, a look back at the year's most impactful creators, videos, and trends. Whether you love it or only remember 2018, Rewind was always meant to be a celebration of you. But 2020 has been different, and it doesn't feel right to carry on as if it weren't. So we're taking a break from Rewind this year. We know that so much of the good that did happen in 2020 was created by all of you. You found ways to lift people up, help them cope, and make them laugh. You made a hard year genuinely better. Thank you for making a difference, YouTube. That's YouTube's statement that they put up on Twitter. I did think that, the only remember 2018. That was pretty funny, actually, honestly. The fact that they had the guts to even mention it tells me that whoever wrote this statement seems to have a genuine understanding of how people feel about the Rewind. Which is weirdly enough, the way the statement reads, it's not so cut and dry to say, it's not happening, 2020 sucks, bye. There's clearly some level of sadness behind this. I don't know, the way I read it, I just feel the vibe that it emanates. I think it emanates this vibe of resignation to just how defeated this year has made people feel, which is such a shame because for all the years, right, for there to be a YouTube Rewind, maybe this was the year we all needed to highlight the best moments of YouTube. I completely understand and agree with YouTube saying this year wouldn't have felt right with one, at least on the surface. But I do think that this would have been the year where if they could have done it right, and highlighted the hope that they speak of, the quote, you found ways to lift people up, help them cope, and make them laugh, end quote. If you could have found a way to genuinely share that on YouTube Rewind, it didn't have to be a big 20-minute video production with millions of dollars behind it. Honestly, I don't know why YouTube doesn't understand this. They don't need to make this huge Hollywood production for a Rewind for people to enjoy it. They truly do not. YouTube is built on the backs of those who film themselves in their bedrooms on a webcam, right? Like, that is the entire backbone of this platform. YouTube doesn't have to try so hard. They just have to be honest and genuine with us. And this, I think, would have been the year, too, if they could have spotlighted that in any way. Perhaps that would have brought people back around to caring about YouTube, feeling for YouTube. I mean, get some of the viewers, some of the fan base back in their corner. But it seems that even YouTube has given up on this year, and that's such a shame. But I kind of understand it, because if what they were going to make was yet another one of those compilations of just stats, honestly, what's the point? What's the point of making one of those videos? If you haven't seen the YouTube Rewinds, I recommend you go watch them all. Just watch them all. That way you have an understanding of kind of what I'm talking about here. And they're not crazy long, and they're interesting. Sometimes funny, sometimes cringe, but there's something. There's something every time. And if they were going to do another one like 2019, I would have said don't bother. Just don't bother. But if 2020 could have been the year that YouTube learned that 2019 doesn't work, that 2018 was a failure, and just gone back, just start over, the 2010, go back to what you did in 2010, but instead of trends, instead of the fads that happen on the platform, just find examples. They don't have to be super well known, right, in all regions across the globe. Just find some examples of amazing things happening. You know, I think it could have been, I think an opportunity is lost here. I think an opportunity was lost here. So I feel really bittersweet. On the face of it, when I first heard this announcement, I thought to myself, well, it's probably for the best that we don't have a rewind, because it's been such a rough year and we should just move on from this year. And I don't know. I again, it's very defeatist. I think the first time I heard this, I even retweeted it and said something along the lines like it's probably for the best that that we need to move on from 2020 because 2020 sucks. But with a little more thought, and I'm thinking about it now, I think that there was an opportunity here lost to wrap up 2020 with some level of that hope that YouTube claims we've brought. I don't know. Maybe someone else will do it. Maybe there will be another YouTube creator that picks up the gauntlet of trying to create their own rewind. That certainly happened back in 2018. I think it happened in 2019 too, where some other creators did the effort of making their own version of a YouTube rewind. And honestly, I think it would be really interesting to see other YouTube creators try to do the same for this year. I'm not going to hold my breath that anyone's going to take up the mantle to do so for a number of reasons. Some of the biggest YouTube creators probably won't bother because Rewind won't be trending, so it's not going to earn a ton of views if you make it on your own. So there's sort of a meta understanding there. But even beyond that, I get the feeling that many other creators aren't going to find that it's worth it to take on that mantle themselves. I could be wrong. I'm kind of hoping I'm wrong. I'm kind of hoping someone does, and we get to see what it is. Some of these very brilliant people that exist on the platform. We have some very brilliant people that I don't even think calling them a YouTuber does them justice. I think we've got some amazing videographers here on the platform, and I would love to see them come up with something themselves and prove to YouTube that if they don't take up the mantle, we will. I don't think I'm the one to do that, so don't expect me to do it. I'm just a weirdo that plays video games on YouTube. That's all I do. I don't do any videography, no, or at least nothing that I would consider worthy of such a hoity-toity title. But that's been my YouTube reminiscence, my YouTube nostalgia, our discussion around the cancellation of YouTube Rewind 2020. Let me know what you think of this cancellation or about this news in general. Tell me what you think about the previous rewinds. Hit me up on Twitter at Weston Hasty. Maybe I'll actually remember to put that handle down in the description of this podcast so you can look it up more easily, just in case you don't know how to spell my name. But you've been listening to a Hasty Podcast. Find me on anchor.fm/Hasty Podcast. I'm also available on Spotify and Breaker and Pocket Casts. And hang on, there's another one. It's eluding me. There's links to all of my podcast locations, though, on my Anchor page. So, again, I recommend anchor.fm/Hasty Podcast to get all those links. Look me up anywhere you listen, and maybe I'll show up one day. That's been a Hasty Podcast. I've been Weston Hasty. I want to thank all of you so much for listening. And hopefully, with any luck, I won't forget to record tomorrow's podcast, and you'll hear me again tomorrow. All right, I'm out of here. Bye.